Hi guys, so welcome to Empath 101, and we are going to go over some topics of discussion because I feel the pull to narrow in on like wounding and break down the different definitions, the different layers of different areas of like wounding, words, what they mean, and how they need to be addressed. Don't forget that all my videos are timeless, whether they're energy pools or they're just basic educational or just to get into detail. And if this is coming across your screen, 9 times out of 10 you are dealing with a situation that is we like to call a trauma bond. So we're going to break down the word trauma bond and how it shows up, what aspects it means when we hear trauma bond, just the general but not limited to meaning of it. So a trauma bond in our spiritual perspective, but I think in every perspective, suggests that it can be understood as a distorted or perverted form of love where the connection is based on pain and manipulation rather than healthy attachment. It can be seen as a spiritual wound where a person's capacity for genuine love and connection is damaged and their spiritual well-being is compromised. So let's go break it down some more. Distorted love and attachment. Trauma bonds often develop in abusive or manipulative relationships where there is a cycle of abuse followed by periods of kindness or love. This creates a deep, unhealthy emotional attachment where the victim becomes dependent on the abuser for their emotional survival. Spiritually, this can be seen as a provision of God's love where the victim believes the love of God's love, where the victim believes that love should involve pain and suffering. Okay, so we all know trauma bond is where you kind of bond with somebody because you've been through the same type of traumas, you've been through the same type of history, so you resort to certain ways of reaction or reactive ways that you expect them to understand because of the background. Trauma bonds are something that the relative ground that you're on is because of your reactions to certain things, the way you manipulate, the way you can play on emotions, the way you utilize your past, your histories, and the things that have hurt you or beat you down as an excuse for your behaviors that you are trying not to change. So it develops so many different other woundings like codependency, physical abuse, sexual abuse, verbal abuse, like all types of different aspects grows from trauma bonding. Okay, trauma bonding is something that's like very, 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 very rampant just in life in general. A lot of people want to be around people that's more like them because they feel like they understand. It's one thing for them to understand and y'all can help and grow with each other. It's another thing for y'all to fester on it and continue to harvest that trauma and can passing it on more and more and more because you're not trying to address it. Y'all are trying to cover it and use it as an anchor instead of steps. An anchor referring to something that's keeping you held down and weighed down to a certain pattern, certain ways of thinking, certain ways of handling situations, opposed to learning from that trauma, letting it nurture you in a way that you know that that's not the right thing, that's the opposite of what it should be done, and using it as a stair step to walk up and arise past it. So let's go to the spiritual wounds and stagnation. Trauma bonding can lead to a feeling of spiritual stagnation, a sense of deadness or emptiness, and a loss of joy and enthusiasm for life. It can also involve a loss of freedom to choose and a feeling of being trapped in a cycle of abuse. The victim may lose their sense of self and become overly dependent on the abuser for their sense of identity and worth. I'm very familiar with that because I was in a relationship for 10 years. It was very, 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 very something that was so sweep you off your feet that I didn't even realize that me was gone. You know what I'm saying? Like, you lose yourself in them. You lose your own identity. You go into their world, but they're not stepping into your world. You're so lost in their world that you become a part of their life instead of y'all bringing your lives together, and then becoming dependent on them, dependent on their approval, dependent on their love, dependent on them thinking when all in all, you always had your own brain, you always had your own, XYZ, but you let it all go because you merge it with theirs, and then it's like a toxic cycle of leave, come back, break up, make up, break up, make up. A lot of people try to use the word unconditional to cover up the trauma bond. They will play with the word unconditional love and utilize that as a cover-up word, opposed to them being realistic about the situation is a trauma bond, which is what I had to wake up to. I used to say, oh, it's unconditional. No, somebody is abusing you. Somebody is utilizing like funds when they know they're the only source of income to control you. Somebody is playing on your needs and holding it back and this to control. That is not love. That is trauma bonding. And when you're in a situation where you might be trauma bonded, think back to your childhood when you grew up and like the environment and what you've seen, and is that why you're so comfortable with this situation, and why is this normal to you, and why are you accepting it, and why do they feel like it's normal? Is it something that relates, something that reminds you of like when you were a kid, you was watching like, oh, that's weird, I'll never do that, or you watching it from the outside. Take yourself out of your feet and fly higher and look at your own situation from the outside looking in. how would you feel? And I always say, like, if your kid or your child, because our kids tend to be the closest thing to us. How would you feel if you were watching your kid go through whatever type of relationship you're going through? Would it be okay? Would you accept it? That's a way that you can kind of get through there. So let's talk about the best part, breaking free. Healing from a trauma bond requires recognizing the unhealthy nature of the connection and seeking support to break free, which we just literally scratched the surface of. This may involve educating oneself about trauma bonding, building a support system, developing healthy coping mechanisms, and establishing boundaries. And one thing for sure is you cannot fix the problem if you don't admit to the problem, or you don't recognize it's a problem. You don't recognize the habit. You keep ignoring it, okay? Ultimately, spiritual healing involves reclaiming one's sense of self, rediscovering one's capacity for healthy love and connection, and know that you're worth it. You deserve it. And finding freedom from the cycle of abuse. In essence, trauma bonding from a spiritual perspective is a manifestation of spiritual wounds that can be healed through recognizing the unhealthy attachment, seeking support, and reclaiming one's true self and spiritual well-being. In order to change, you gotta want to change. In order to fix something, you gotta dig out the root of the problem. And that doesn't mean anything's wrong with you. It just can be a way of thinking. Sometimes the things that are so easy are so hard, because it's hard really to change your mind frame, to change your perspective is harder than it seems. Especially when it's something you're used to being around, especially when it's something you're used to saying, especially when it's what makes you feel like you. However, if you decide to change that and want happy, good, peaceful calmness to make you feel like you, only you can change that. And don't forget, your habits and the way you live tend to rub off on your kids. So I'm speaking to a group of people that I know they're ready for change, just like me. I'm not speaking on anything I haven't been through. I've been through it. I'm still at the end portion of me healing it, and I have felt so much of a difference. Yes, I have my days, and just because, let's fix this. Just because you heal does not mean you're never gonna have those days. You are. Everybody's gonna have those days. But reflecting back and looking how far you came and how far you've grown is different from reflecting back and still getting mad, angry, or crying. You know you're healed when you can look back at a situation and it doesn't make you cry, doesn't make you mad, and it makes you say, dang, I've come a long way. So let's continue to learn together so we can grow together. And as I always say, remember to pray. Bye, guys.